I'd like to show you a brilliant attacking performance by Mamedyarov from the World Under-18 Championship played in 2003. Don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe, and do consider supporting us on patreon.com or PayPal. You'll find the links down there. So why on earth am I looking through a game from 2003? Well, first of all, it's a brilliant game. It's always stuck in my mind. I think we see Mamedyarov at his absolute rawest here somehow. We can see his instincts are to attack. You know, he loves the initiative. And in fact, in this World Under-18, he won it with 10 out of 11. He absolutely destroyed the field. But I want to look at this because I mentioned this game when I looked at the game between Dubov and Kharitonov, and I talked about this very typical exchange sacrifice in King's Indian Benoni position. So there's a relation to it in this game. So here we go. So Mamedyarov with black. Now it's absolutely standard mainline King's Indian position. And now Mamedyarov plays bishop g4. It's an interesting variation. I used to see this a lot played in Switzerland. A lot of the Swiss players enjoyed playing this move. And it's an interesting idea because basically now the knight drops back to d7. So it's rather different from the normal King's Indians, obviously, where black plays the pawn to e5. And the idea is that you've cleared this bishop out of the way. Often that bishop on c8 for a long time doesn't find a good diagonal. So basically just black gets this out of the way, wants to knock out this knight, and that means that black has greater control over these central dark squares. So white pushes on with d5, so gains some space. And now we have this very typical kind of King's Indian Benoni position, where black can try to break with e6 or with b5, and white is holding this space advantage and grabs the two bishops as well. But this is sort of part of black's strategy because knocking out that knight allows black more control over these dark squares. And you can see that dark square bishop on g7. Well, what a killer diagonal, and that piece plays a great role in this game. So knight c7, so black is preparing perhaps to break with b5, which in combination with the bishop would be wonderful, and maybe play e6 as well. So a6, now we're getting close to this move, so which I think would give black excellent counterplay, so therefore white just stops that one with a4. e6, rook b1, and now e takes d5. So white has a choice. Which way do you recapture it? If c takes, then that makes it much easier for black to break with b5. By playing e takes d5, white maintains this space advantage and still has the possibility to break with b4 eventually to get some pressure on b7. But in the meantime, well, the king side starts to open up a little bit. Queen h4 played by Mamedyarov, and that's typical. As I said, his sort of basic instinct in many positions is to attack. Now I think, you know, once he got to the elite level, then he had to just rein it back a bit. But there are so many examples of wonderful attacks by him, wonderful where he uses the initiative brilliantly, and this game is very typical of that. So already white has to be careful of tactics on the e-file. Bishop g5 isn't working because, you know, we've got moves like bishop takes c3, and careful, the queen has to look after this, and then I think we can actually take here and overload the queen. So in this position, bishop g4 played. Well, I got to be careful now because there's bishop g5 trapping the queen. So the queen could go back, but well, we don't want to do that. And I'm sure that Mamedyarov had anticipated this move and had his response prepared, which was rook takes bishop on e3. So now we see the similarities between the Dubov-Karyakin game. Now, I think in this case, to capture with the rook with the pawn would not be very good. I think this is a much better version of that exchange sacrifice that Karyakin played, because already the queen is in on these dark squares. The knight would come to e5. Excellent compensation. You can see these dark squares are very weak. Absolutely the best move is to recapture with the queen, which leaves white's king side in much better place. So this looks like a much better version for white. But let's see how Mamedyarov manages to just kind of stir things up nicely. So bishop d4 attacks the queen, which dropped back. f5, let's push the bishop away. And now knight e5. So you can see that that bishop has taken up an aggressive post on d4, looking at the king. And Mamedyarov is starting to just build up on the king side, the knight coming in. Of course, the f-pawn is pinned, can't drive away that knight. And this is what I would call a pure sacrifice, in that there is no immediate compensation. You're not winning a pawn, you're not winning back material, you're not crashing through to the king. At the moment, this is just an initiative. Black is building on the king side. And I think these kind of sacrifices are the most difficult to play and to judge. You need real guts to give up material when there's nothing tangible to be had. And white does have counterplay. b4 is a good move. White certainly needs to get the rooks into the game. It's a rook against bishop, and let's try and use that rook on b1. And this is a nice move. No panic. Knight e8. It's interesting. He's prepared to just give up that b pawn. So what would happen if pawn takes pawn on c5, pawn takes pawn, rook takes b7? Well, that knight would hop in to the d6 square. And then black would keep going on the king side. So you can see that already with f3 threatened, that looks really menacing. So knight e8 has just been played. a5, fixing that pawn on b7. And the knight swings around, knight f6. Pawn takes c5, and actually, probably the best move here is to play pawn takes c5, just protecting that bishop on d4. And, well, giving the pawn, but, well, you get on with it on the king side. But Mamedyarov played bishop takes c5. Rook takes b7, and, well, he continued so calmly, just rook f8, just swinging the pieces over. And here, white came back with the rook, which you'd think, well, doesn't look bad to defend along the third rank. But perhaps it would have been more pragmatic just to play rook c7 and give up rook for bishop like this. And then block that f-pawn. And there's no immediate breakthrough for black on the king side. All you can say is that black has some control over the dark squares, but I think probably with best play, white should be better here. It's still tricky. It's very tricky. But rook b3 played. And now Mamedyarov started to roll on the king side, and this is already pretty desperate. Knight a4. I mean, you can see where white was coming from with this rook b3, because he obviously thought, well, the rook's going to defend. This doesn't look bad. And the knight can hassle that bishop. But Mamedyarov was too quick. Knight e4. Attacking the queen e1. And now the bishop is safe again. Bishop d4. And in fact, that knight is just way out of play. Bishop f3. And here you can already take on f2 and play g4, but knight g3 played by Mamedyarov. I mean, that's a beautiful move. Obviously using the pin here. Queen d2. And you can take the rook on f1, but actually it's much better just to leave that knight on g3 and just play straight on with the attack. g4, excellent move. So queen takes bishop obviously will fail to this. And knight e2 check. So the bishop is attacked, drop back to d1. Pawn takes g3. Excuse me, pawn takes h3. My goodness. G takes h3. And king h8. Nice and simple. If necessary, that rook is going to swing over to attack the king, and really it's gone now completely. Of course, if rook takes knight, then queen takes rook using the pin. So king g2 from white. There are a few ways to win here, but Mamedyarov, you know, he has a great artistic sense, and I really like this move, queen e4 check. Well, first of all, we should say that if king takes knight, then rook g8. It's nice to use that rook, and then, well, black is just crashing through. And here's a nice idea. If bishop f3, we can take. And then white is just pinned up here, and knight f4 check. Well, we can't play knight f4 check immediately, but yeah, if the queen moves away, then knight f4 check. And otherwise, rook g8 is coming, and queen takes rook, and well, all kinds of nasty stuff. So after queen e4 check, f3 played, and the queen just came back again. Really nice. And this just leaves the queen, excuse me, the king. My goodness, I can't speak today. Leaves the king absolutely helpless. Somehow, you know, these dark squares, they've gone basically, and black's pieces just crash through. Rook g8. And now it's just a case of clearing the knight out of the way. After knight f1 check, white resigned. So let's just go through to the finish. Rook takes knight, queen g3 check, king h1, queen takes h3, queen h2, and queen takes f1, and checkmate. Absolutely beautiful. So as I said, World Under 18 Championship won by Mamedyarov, and that is a game that's always stuck in my mind. Absolutely beautiful, just a straightforward attack, and it shows Mamedyarov's sort of basic attacking instincts. Great stuff. Thanks very much for watching. More coming soon.